Yes, thank you very much. And I can truly say a warm welcome from Madrid. I will give you a brief update on where we stand with Sanoma as two businesses, both leading in their own field and ready for future growth. If we look at these two businesses, we see that over the years we have now grown the Sanoma learning business into the leading European K-12 learning company. And K-12 stands for the first 12 years of formal education, meaning primary and secondary and vocational education. And we have grown that business and nearly doubled it in size now in the last couple of years. At the same time, you know us very well as the leading cross-media company in Finland. And there we're on a very successful track of digital transformation. Overall, we have 300 to 400 million financial headroom for further M&A, and we will focus that on growing our learning business further. As a typical Nordic company, we think that dividend is an important part of our equity story, and we pay a solid and growing dividend. Sanoma is in itself a sustainable investment. We're a learning and media company, and those businesses are intrinsically aimed to give a positive impact on society. And our other footprints are relatively small, and I will go into a bit more detail at that in the second part of my presentation. But if we look at these two businesses in a bit more detail and a bit of the financial highlights. If you look at the learning business, that is now, if we do a pro forma for last year and we include the Santillana acquisition, 600 million in revenues, with an EBIT margin that, excluding PPA, above 20%. And we have in the European market a 13% market share. And that means that we're serving more than 20 million students across the whole of Europe. If we look at the media business in Finland, you see it's about similar size in net sales, 560 million, slightly over, and an operational EBIT margin close to 12%. And you see that in that transformation of our Finnish media business, nowadays the business to consumer revenues is already close to 50%. But still also on the advertising side, with a very strong digital component, we reach over 97% of all Finns every week. So also from an advertising perspective, still a very strong proposition. If I then show a bit of the transformation that we have done. And as I said, we have grown that learning business very significantly. But if you look in the last 2 years, you see that in the learning side, 4 acquisitions done in 2019, where Iddink, the Dutch learning service provider, was the largest one. 4 acquisitions, growing that business. And then last year, even during Corona, we acquired the Santillana business, and that is the leading learning company in Spain. So that's the company I am visiting this week. But at the same time, also in media, we did major transformation. If you remember, we had a solid media business in the Netherlands and an Oikotie, a classified media business in Finland. We divested those and we acquired a subscription news business from Alma, the regional news business in Finland. And that was, of course, highly synergetic acquisition that we have now fully integrated. And with that, you see 2 very focused leading businesses, solid profitability and cash flow. And with the 300 to 400 million financial headroom, we will aim to acquire further into that learning space. And this is the overview of the transformation, let's say, in financial numbers. You see that learning is around 50% of the total revenues, but already close to 70% of the total earnings of the group. So in that sense, you can truly say that Sanoma has transformed into a learning company. But also within Media Finland, you see a significant transformation where the share of advertising revenue is decreasing and the share of business to consumer, the consumer income, is increasing. And overall, already 40% of Media Finland's revenues is subscription-based. So you see that also in the media business, the stability of the revenues and the cash flows is further guaranteed by more consumer income and more subscription part of the total. If we then go in a bit more detail into the learning business, because that might be less familiar still. We have, as I said, a strong focus on K-12. So we enable ourselves to expand geographically, but keep our focus on K-12. And that is primary, secondary, and vocational education. And within that business, we have several services. A major part is the blended learning materials. That means all the materials that a teacher needs to teach a subject, both print and digital. But we also have, in addition, digital platforms, both for teaching, so that the teacher can use to show the materials in the classroom, but also for schools to administer. So in order to, for example, have the contact with the parents, have the accumulate all the marks that the student has gotten, those administration platforms we also have in several countries. And then, in addition, specifically through the IDINK business in the Netherlands and the Nova Era business in Poland, we also do quite a bit of distribution of content, both digital and physical books distributed to the students directly. We like this business so much because it has very high barriers to entry. It is very difficult to enter this business and to build a portfolio of schools and teachers that buy the materials. And there is only a very slow churn and very high stickiness to this business. And that, of course, works in favor. It sometimes also works against when you want to geographically expand. Then it means that the expansion needs to happen almost uniquely through M&A, through acquiring a company. But we see three growth levers for our learning business. We see market share gains in the markets in which we're in. We see a possibility to expand services outside the areas that we're already in the countries. And the distribution business is a good example of that. And then the third one, as I already mentioned, is M&A. In that M&A, when we go and expand geographically, we see that we can really contribute the digital platforms, which are best in class. We're coming out of highly digitalized countries. And then that European footprint gives us the benefit of scale to develop these platforms even further. Our long-term financial target for this business is a comparable net sales growth of 2 to 5% and an operational EBIT margin excluding PPA that is above 23. As you saw in the slide before, we're already close to 21 if we do the pro forma on last year, including Santillana, but we think that digitalization and further scale will improve the profitability further. And that scale you see very much on this slide, where you see across Europe now our presence. We are active in 11 European countries. We don't see ourselves limited to Europe. We can expand this business also internationally. But if you look at the European market, that's a market of 4 to 5 billion in sales, 75 million students. So in itself already very sizable. But you see that with our 600 million revenues, we are the market leader, but have only 13% of the market. And that shows how fragmented this learning market still is. And the increasing digitalization will give a good impulse to the consolidation in which we aim to be active. We see in these markets both an opportunity to go into new markets where we're not yet in, but let's also not forget that we are clearly interested to also grow in the markets in which we are already. And that expansion is typically highly synergetic, because in market you can, of course, combine both on the publishing and on the commercial, on the sales teams. So all in all, very interesting market and an increase in interesting development in the past years, where we have expanded then into the whole of Europe. But if I then go to Media Finland, there also quite a transformation has taken place. We have focused the company more and more, and the focus is very clearly on news and feature, entertainment, and B2B marketing solutions. We will consider smaller acquisitions, even though, of course, we are already a very sizable company in the Finnish market. And those acquisitions would then need to comply with the characteristic of highly synergetic bolt-on acquisitions. As I said before, we have an increasing share of consumer income and increasing our subscription, definitely also through the acquisition of the regional news business from Alma. You see that B2C sales is now around 50%, and that growth has also come organically. Helsingin Sanomat, our largest news subscription paper, has grown now for the 4th year in a row. Quarter after quarter, it increases its subscription base, already well above the 400,000. But also on the entertainment side of the business, Ruutu Plus, video on demand, has more than 300,000 subscriptions. So that shows that subscription business, which is, I would say, a characteristic of the Finnish market, is well covered by us. We have a proven track record in the digital transformation. We see that the share of digital in the total mix of our subscription is very significant. And the interesting feature is that increasing digitalization will mean increasing profit contribution, because the distribution and printing of a newspaper is quite a bit more expensive than the distribution of the digital news. If we look at this business, we see that the long-term financial target is to have stable net sales. So stable revenues, meaning plus or minus 2%, but an increasing profitability, an increasing operational EBIT excluding PPA, where it's now around 12, to increase that to 12 to 14%. And that is largely due to that increasing digitalization. I already indicated solid dividend is an important part of our equity story. And you see from the graph that with the increasing cash flow, we have also increased the dividend to the shareholders. And last year, that was 52 cents compared to 50 cents the year before, representing a total of around 85 million and around the 70% of the net cash flow that year. We typically pay that in 2 parts in order to accommodate the cash flow development of our business over the year, which is heavy cash flow generating in the second part, given the learning business. And we have a dividend policy that aims to pay an increasing dividend equal to 40 to 60% of the annual free cash flow. And that is, if we look last year, a dividend yield of 3.6%. So we consider that an attractive yield on a stable and growing business. Sustainability has always been central to our business. In a sense, learning and media business in and of themselves have a positive impact on society. And we do, of course, all the elements to make sure that that is qualitative and inclusive. We have then in our sustainability strategy 6 overall points. Those first 2 are, of course, the learning and the media. And 2 elements are quite specific to our business: trustworthy data and valued people. The data is, of course, an important element for all digital applications, and we value the trust that we have gotten from our users to get those data, and we care for that very highly. Valued people, we're typically a creative industry, both in our book publishing, in our learning content publishing, in our news. Therefore, people are key to our business. And then there are 2 elements to our sustainability strategy that are more common between companies: vital environment and responsible business practices. And specifically for that vital environment element of the strategy, we have put a target out, a very explicit one, to be by 2030 emission neutral. And that is not only for our own emissions, which is only 10% of our total, where we might even be a bit earlier already emission neutral, but specifically working with our suppliers to make our business by 2030 fully emission neutral. And we continue developing this sustainability strategy and also our reporting around it. And you see that we're already AA in the MSCI rating. We have on the Sustainalytics a very low ESG risk rating, so performing already very well. But we value it also to make sure that we challenge ourselves with the sustainability development goals, using science-based targets for that. And we're a signatory of the UN Global Compact to make sure that also with an interaction with various international companies, we set the highest standard for ourselves. So then coming back to the summary, a growing business, specifically on the learning side, growing our European leadership in K-12. You know us very well from the leading cross-media business in Finland with a successful digital transformation, 300 to 400 million headroom that we want to use to grow the learning further, a solid dividend, and Sanoma as a sustainable investment with a positive impact on society at large. So with that, I would like to round off my presentation.
Thank you, Susan Duinhoven, for such an insightful presentation. My first question is, can you see and hear us?
Yes, I hear very well.
Excellent, excellent. It's kind of funny that today we're sitting here at Flick Studios in the corner of Sanoma headquarters at Sanoma Talo while you're away in Madrid. How are things in Spain for Sanoma today?
Yeah, very good. Very good. It's very exciting also to be able to visit the companies again and to spend some time with the team. The Santillana business, of course, was acquired at year end. Yeah. And we had done the whole of the due diligence largely through Teams and Zoom meetings. Yeah. So it's very nice to be able to catch up with the team and see what a strong business this is and how they are preparing for what is very attractive for us, the curriculum change that will happen next year.
What have you learned while you're there in Madrid? Talking about learning.
Learning, yes, yes. Well, I'm definitely trying to learn a bit of Spanish.
All right,
because
sounds good.
to work all through translators is difficult. But as you will understand, doing a business meeting in Spanish is something quite different.
Yeah, it must be something else. Yeah, that's great to hear. Listen to your presentation. I think we could talk briefly about international growth of Sanoma, especially the learning segment today. How has the corona pandemic affected the learning segment? And at the end of the day, have lockdowns and school closures been good or bad for business?
Yeah, I think we had last year almost no impact net from the pandemic. Doesn't mean that there was no impact, but it was, the positives and the negatives cancelled each other out.
Okay.
Overall, we think what we see in our business is that the increasing use of digital tools that was necessity last year have brought teachers to the realization that actually a lot of progress has been made in the last couple of years, and also teachers who did not feel that comfortable with using these digital tools are now much more comfortable. So we think that in the longer run, this will actually have quite a positive impact on the industry at large, but also at Sanoma, because we are a bit ahead coming out of highly digitalized countries.
Yeah, makes sense. We also have some questions from our viewers, and my colleague Henrik is about to ask you one of those questions.
Yanni is asking, you are looking to grow your learning business, but the debt load is getting quite heavy. So you have ambition to do more mergers, and how would you finance it?
Yes. Yeah, the debt load, I mean, if you look at our business, then it is good to realize that we always have a bit of a peak in our debt in the mid of the year. And that is not because we're then spending, doing strange things in the first half, but it's a logical thing. We are a growing learning business, and a learning business has all its income in the third quarter when the kids go back to school. Then they buy the materials and the licenses, and therefore that's the moment when we get the earnings. And of course, our costs are spread throughout the whole of the year. So it means that when you now look after the second quarter, you see a little bit higher debt load, but that's very logical because that's just because the cash is now coming in the second half of the year. Of course, with our acquisition of Santillana, our debt increased a bit. We put a long-term target on our leverage, so on the net debt over EBITDA at 3. And we expect that by year end, we're well below that 3 again. So then that means that we have some room to do further acquisitions. And that is how we intend to go forward. Acquire something, then we might go slightly over the 3, but then come back by earning through the positive cash flow also from that new acquisition, and then only once we're ready, acquire again.
How do you see this digitalization in schools in Europe? In which countries there is most room for digital growth opportunities for Sanoma and your K-12 business?
Yes. Yeah, you see in Europe quite differences in digitalization between the countries. If we take, for example, Spain, we were talking about it, very low digitalization. Santillana, our business there, has the largest digital business, but only 3% of its total revenues. If you compare that, for example, to the Netherlands or to Belgium, Finland, Sweden, much higher digitalization. So it is, the growth is actually still in all countries, because even in the Netherlands or in Finland, we can still grow with digital. But it's obvious that in the countries that are low digitalized, like Poland and Spain for us, that's where most of the digital growth is still to come. And that's the attractiveness for us. Those are large countries where we can then also win market share by introducing those high quality digital platforms ahead of any competitor.
All right. Let's talk a little bit about Media Finland as well. Earlier this evening, we heard a presentation from Alma Media from Mr. Kai Telanne. You bought Aamulehti and several other newspapers from Alma last year. How do you see the future of legacy news media? Your take is obviously a little bit different from Alma's.
Yeah, we have, of course, a very successful subscription news business with Helsinki Sanomat. And therefore, for us to combine those two businesses, both successful in their own right, to combine them created a lot of synergies. So that is for us a very attractive element. And we see the need for news to be, something of now and the future. The way in which we serve that news and the storytelling behind it, that of course will develop and will digitalize. And as I indicated, digitalization in the news business is actually advantageous. It might reduce the revenues a bit, but it increases the overall profitability. So all in all, we see very good prospects for our news business, but do realize that you need scale for that. And that was why we were attracted to acquire the Alma regional news business.
Do you see any synergies between learnings business and media business?
Yeah, there are some synergies, but I've always been quite transparent on this one. It's small. It is typically in the overhead structure of the company. So we see 4 to 5 million synergies where we share procurement, we buy together, we do treasury together, finance, some infrastructure systems that we share between the companies. But the essence of the business is very different and therefore also very separate. And we have 2 very strong teams working on those businesses. So that makes that we feel quite comfortable to have them both, even with modest synergies. Even though 4 to 5 million in my book, it's still significant money.
Yeah, sounds good. Our time is about to run out, but I still have one question to ask. Where do you see Sanoma in the next 5 years?
Yeah, I still see that this very much progressing along the path indicated. I think the learning business will be a successful business, growing, going into new territories step by step, with care, and not to grow too fast. And I see a strong media business in Finland, increasingly digital and increasingly consumer-oriented.
All right, thank you, Susan. Have a nice evening in Madrid.
Thank you very much.
Thank
you too.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.